It's going down. H-Town, Hiram Clark, B.Scott.
B.Scott from Hiram Clark. B.Scott from Hiram Clark. B.Scott from Hiram Clark.
Welcome to the B Block Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Scott, and I very much appreciate you for joining me. We're going to go over the Texans week 1 win briefly because we are already past the midway point of the week, and they've got a huge Sunday night football matchup in week 2 against the Chicago Bears that I also want to talk about. But I want to start off with this because I think this is just it's relevant for the timing, but I think it'll be a relevant conversation piece or point to make throughout. You'll see where I'm going with this. Has there been a discussion that we've had about the Texans that feels any less relevant today than the one surrounding the backup running back position? I mean, that is where I am as I record this thing on a Thursday morning. I meant to do this a lot earlier in the week, but here we are. As I record this thing on a Thursday morning, I feel like I'm still in a similar place of where I've been all week, and that's, man, we spent a lot of time as a Texans community, media, fans, whatever you want to call it, like just as a crew and as a label, a lot of time was spent on, man, what is Dameon Pierce's place on this team? Where's Cam Akers at? And Cam Akers was inactive for this game. And a lot of people thought, myself included, well, that's sure odd because Cam Akers should take the second most amount of carries in this game. Should be the dude that spells Joe Mixon if and when he needs it. And I can't think of a conversation that we had as much as we had it that appears to matter less a week into the season, a conversation like that matters less than the backup running back situation. Whether it's going to be Dameon Pierce and how many carries he gets, whether it's going to be Cam Akers and how many carries he gets. I even made the point in one of those preseason games, it might have even been the last one, that, man, if Dameon Pierce gets carries over Cam Akers, that's going to be a problem. Is it, though? Like, I will retract that statement today, right now, because what is clear to me and what the big takeaway is, and I knew this, I don't know why I fell into this trap myself, but what is clear to me is that they have a clear and obvious bell cow type of running back that they're going to hand the ball off to. And whoever gets the 3 to 5 carries that the backup running back is going to get, negligible. A negligible point. Anybody should be able to get in there and spell Joe Mixon of the 20 to 25 carries that I expect him to get in the game. And I know in this one he got 30. In the win against the Colts, he got 30, went for 159 yards, was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. I think it's the 4th time that that's happened in his career. But Joe Mixon, and I'm not going to say Joe Mixon alone, but Joe Mixon primarily, for me, is the reason that the Texans, specifically on offense, let me keep this very specific to what they are offensively. He is the reason why, to me, the Texans are for real and not just hyped. And you can throw Stephon Diggs into that mix as well. Like the 2 key newcomers on offense, Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs, they are the reason. Now, the reason why I'm going Joe Mixon over Stephon Diggs in this is because they've already got dynamic wide receivers, dynamic pass catching options. They've got C.J. Stroud as their quarterback, who I think could elevate even lesser talent if he needed to. Now, thank God he doesn't, right? We're not talking about lesser talent. We're talking about Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, like Dalton Schultz, who also missed practice on Wednesday, I believe, with an injury. So that's worth monitoring. I believe an ankle injury that he suffered in the game. But they already had a dynamic passing attack, a dynamic passing offense, and options, starting with their quarterback, being that guy. What they clearly did not have was the type of running game that they could rely on in a couple of situations, either to end the game, no matter what week it was. In this case, it's week one. Like the type of run game that they could rely on to play keep away from an opposing team or from an opposing offense that is showing some explosivity, showing some capability of threatening you. They did not have that type of run game that they could just rely on to say, hey, we're going to play keep away and we're just going to run this ball. We're going to run the ball, period. We'll convert a couple of pass plays, but the overall strategy here is to run the ball. They did not have a kind of run game where they could like credibly rely on that as a strategy. And now they do. Now they do. They also didn't have the kind of run game where, hey, if it's, let's call it the AFC divisional game. Let's just call it the playoffs. If it's the playoffs and we are, I don't know, in Kansas City or Baltimore or Buffalo or one of these cold, or Cincinnati, or one of these cold weather places where they play outside, Cleveland. Fortunately, you had Cleveland at home, right? Last year. If we're in one of these cold weather places and throwing the ball is not necessarily going to look the same way it does or did when we were at NRG Stadium, the way it does throughout the course of a regular season, we need to hand the ball off. Running the ball needs to be a strategy, not just a thing that we do to keep the offense balanced, but needs to be a focus, a focal point for us. They can do that now. They can do that now. And I thought that was one of the more important elements or components, I should say, to adding into this offense. And they have that now. They absolutely have that now. I think that is one thing that you can take away from that game, that is not an overreaction. It's not an oversimplification. It's not a like knee-jerk type of thing. Like that what we saw in week one was 100% for real. Now, here's where I'm probably going to make a couple of people upset. And I don't mean to. I just got to keep it real, at least the way I see it. I think the offensive line deserves a lot of credit for the way that they played in week one, specifically in the run game. I don't think they deserve a lot of credit for how they protected the quarterback, but that's a separate discussion. I'll get to that in just a second. I think they do deserve credit for the job that they did in the run game. I don't think that Joe Mixon has the game that he had, and I don't think that they win the game in the fashion that they win it without the offensive line performing the way it did in the run game, okay? I do feel like this was mostly about Joe Mixon. I do. I feel like this was mostly about Joe Mixon. He was the difference. Now, everybody who touched the ball, everybody who ran the ball, ran it well, okay? In Dameon Pierce's 3 carries, he averaged 5 yards a pop. He had a 9-yard run, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so, like, it's not like it was just Joe Mixon who performed well behind that offensive line, like it was just Joe Mixon who performed well running the ball. But, man, you look at the style of running. You look at the way he was finishing plays. There's just not anybody else like that on the team, and there's nobody that they've had like that in a while. Dameon Pierce, to a much lesser degree, I thought, ran with that sort of attitude his rookie season, so 2 years ago now, but he just wasn't quite as dynamic as this guy is, right? And I point to this stat that Everett Gearlings put out. This is from Texans PR. He put out this stat that I don't want to read too much into, but I do feel like it is worth just mentioning for context. Joe Mixon ran for 159 yards on the ground. We all know that. 101 yards of his 159. So 101 of his 159 on the ground was yards after contact. That, to me, is not a knock on the offensive line. It is more of a credit to Joe Mixon. And I want that to be clear of what I'm trying to do here, that I'm not trying to dismiss or knock the offensive line. I'm trying to make sure that the appropriate amount of focus and credit is being given to the specific player who I thought was elite. And again, I thought the offensive line did their job. And if they do their job like that for the entirety of the season, they're going to look pretty damn good. It also is not going to matter who the backup running back is because he's going to look pretty damn good, or at least should look pretty damn good. But what made them as dynamic as they were, what made that rushing attack go the way it did was not just an offensive line mauling dudes, and they did their part. It was Joe Mixon finishing plays. Who was the defensive back? Was it Cross? Who was the defensive back who kept finding himself matched up with Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon was getting to the second level? Poor defensive backs for the Indianapolis Colts, who tackled well, but had to make business decisions and had to deal with Joe Mixon up close and personal. Not pretty. The punishment that Joe Mixon tries to impose and does impose on defenders is very specific. And I'm not going to say that it's rare per se, but it's rare here. I'll say that. It's rare here in Houston. We don't see a lot of it, haven't seen a lot of it. So I think that the Texans are for real and not just hyped or overhyped based on the conversation that's been had about them throughout the offseason, training camp, and preseason, all of the Super Bowl talk. And, there's been a lot of talk, and we understand that. I don't think it's just hype. I think it's real. And it is in part because they bring back and even elevate what they were good at last year, which was passing the ball. And I know they weren't great at it in week one, but they did come up with some big plays. Stephon Diggs obviously had a couple of touchdowns, including the game winner. And that was set up by some clutch plays from Nico Collins, who had clutch plays throughout the game. So they still have that dynamic of, we can throw the ball. We got C.J. Stroud. We got all of these different options, pass catching. We add Stephon Diggs to the mix. It did not necessarily look great all the time, but it's there. We understand that it's there, that it's a threat. And it's even better than it was last year. The place where they got exponentially better was by inserting Joe Mixon into the lineup, putting Joe Mixon on the team. And maybe I underestimated it prior to week one. I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do it going forward. Like, I think that is going to be the difference in how well or how much they're able to compete with a Baltimore in the postseason, how much they're able to compete with a Kansas City in the postseason. If it's the Buffalo Bills, whoever it is, like, that is going to be the difference. That is why I feel like the Texans are for real and not just hyped. Now that I was mostly positive, since I was mostly positive about that, I do want to get to what concerns me and concerned me about watching them in this game. Obviously, the pass protection was an issue, and I think part of that might have been because of the field. Could have been. Another part of that could have just been the matchup itself. Like, it's a hell of a matchup. Like, they got those two badasses in the middle between Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. But Latu, the rookie, is going to be a damn good football player in the NFL for a long time if he stays healthy. Kwity Paye is somebody that we don't talk a whole lot about because of DeForest Buckner and because of Grover Stewart, but a damn good football player and has been for the Colts for a while now, and somebody who's shown up on film when the Colts and the Texans play. That's a name. If you're a Texans fan, Kwity Paye is a name that you should know, okay? Latu may be new to you if you don't follow college football as much, but listen to what I just said. That's four really damn good football players up front that the Texans have to deal with in, obviously, the run game and in pass rush situations or pass pro situations for the offensive line. So you could just say, hey, it was a hell of a matchup, and tip your cap to the other side because, as we just acknowledged, those are really good football players. Still didn't feel great about how much they relied on C.J. Stroud to bail them out, to fix messes. And C.J. Stroud has talked about, like, definitely not characterized it the way I just did, but talked about wanting to use his feet more, wanting to show his athleticism more. I think tongue in cheek and it's probably some fun amongst teammates. There have been some challenging. I think Joe Mixon was the one, but there's been some challenging amongst his teammates to, hey man, how athletic are you? Show your athleticism a little bit more out there on the field. And he's taken that in stride. But as much as I enjoy and think that it's a good thing that he's, got this ability to create and to, make something happen with the scramble drills and all of that, I was under the impression that this offensive line was going to be one of the better ones in pass pro. Like that was one of the things that was a bit of a mind bleep, was that, hey, if there was a question about the offensive line, it was going to be, hey, how do they perform in the run game? Not so much how they perform in pass pro, because they're good at that. This game was the inverse of that, and it was a little bit confusing. Now, you're happy for them being good at the thing that you thought that they weren't necessarily as good at, but I don't feel like you want to ignore, and I heard a little bit of this from the commentary. It's like, hey, well, they've been good in pass pro before, they'll be fine. Okay, yeah, I can go with that, but I'm not going to pretend like that meant that they weren't, like this wasn't a data point. Like this wasn't something that happened, and we can just shrug our shoulders and say, well, bad game. Nah, this is something to keep an eye out on with the pass pro, because of how much is invested, not just how much is invested in the offensive line, but I think that it is more important. I think it's very important that they run the ball well, but it is, make no mistake about it, more important that they be good in pass pro because of what they're protecting. Right? Like it's twofold. That's the way that you stretch the field, that you get the ball downfield. You want to protect your quarterback so he can make plays. And, you want big, explosive pass plays as a team, right? So there's the obvious part. The other part that's kind of obvious, but I feel like still is worth mentioning, because we don't say this or say it this way. They're protecting C.J. Stroud, and if I don't give a damn if it's 0 for 17 for whatever reason, if C.J. Stroud for whatever reason loses his powers and cannot hit the side of a fire station, and he's inaccurate as hell in a particular game, I don't care if that happens. The importance of protecting him is enormous. Okay? So, like, it is a matter of protecting him so he can make plays, but also protecting him so he stays healthy. Protecting him so his head don't slam on the ground the way it did against the Jets last year when Quentin Williams got to him, right? Like that is a big part of this, and a reason why it's a little bit more concerning for me. Like, yeah, okay, if you want to say that they normally are good in pass pro and they'll be fine, okay, fine. Or that C.J. Stroud is really good at creating despite, like if it's leaky in the pocket collapses, C.J. Stroud can save all butts, fine. But what I need to see from the offensive line, and this is not just the offensive line, but just let's just call it pass protection in general, overall, is doing a better job of protecting the franchise player, protecting the quarterback. Even if he can find Nico Collins in a scramble drill, and Stroud and Collins are going to torture the Colts for years on the scramble drill. Like, even if that's the case, I need the franchise quarterback protected. Or I would feel like most people would make that a minimum requirement. So that's the thing that concerned me about week one, even in victory, that, the pass protection seemed to be a little bit leaky. There were some matchups that were lost that I wasn't expecting to be lost, particularly by your highly paid tackles. Let's just be honest about it. Laramie Tunsil, excellent player. I think probably a top 3, certainly a top 5 tackle in football. Probably a top 3 tackle in football. Had some bad reps against the rookie, including a couple of false starts on third down, which we know about, and that's been a thing, an issue for years with him. But he usually makes up for it because he's just such a damn good football player. Like, for every false start, you got another example of him completely shutting down the left side. The blind side of the quarterback just not being an issue because he's handling business. And I expect him to continue to be that. But you can't kill your team with the penalties on third down, albeit. Can't kill your team with that. Got to play a little bit better, I think, against the rookie. And shout out to the rookie for doing his thing against an accomplished veteran like Laramie Tunsil. But if we're just being real about it, the tackles have to be better. They have to be better. We can celebrate the offensive line because Joe Mixon went for $160 damn near and was the offensive player of the week, and everything that I just said about them adding this element to their team that makes them a different kind of threat. We can be happy about that, but we cannot act like your highly paid tackles can just be giving up plays the way that they did. I thought especially earlier in that game. Titus Howard on the other side against Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye's a damn good football player. Tip your cap. But overall, I need to see dudes be better. And I know that they can be. That's the reason why I'm even mentioning it or characterizing it the way I am. I'm not saying, hey, do they got tackle problems? Does Blake Fisher need to be in the game? No, I'm not talking like that. I'm not saying that. It is Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard. Those are your staples. Those are your bookend tackles. But they got to be better, a little bit better than they were. I do believe that. So that concerned me. The bigger thing, though, and maybe I buried the lead here, because the bigger thing that was concerning was the big plays that they were giving up. And I feel like I was delicate with this on In the Loop when I joined the guys on Tuesday. I do that every Tuesday. I join them for an hour at 11 a.m. in case y'all didn't realize that. Sports Radio 610 In the Loop. 10 to 2 is that program. 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time is that program. You want to catch me on there. It is from 11 a.m. to noon Central Time on Tuesdays. But when one of the hosts, Reginald Adatula, asked me about Jimmy Ward, I think I soft pedaled the Jimmy Ward critique because I pointed out that, you know, he makes plays, but he gives plays up. And that was the case last year. I suspected that could be the case this year. And hey, look, he's a safety. Defense is hard. I get it. Like, that's just going to be the life of a defensive back in the NFL. You'll make some plays. You'll give some plays up, sure, especially at his age. But Reggie called it degradation. Like, is he degrading essentially as a player through age and injury? The first touchdown to Alec Pierce, where Anthony Richardson slips and gathers his feet somehow and just flings it 65 plus yards into the air for a touchdown to Alec Pierce. The wow factor of that play was how Anthony Richardson just threw it on a rope, how he was able to do that off balance in traffic. It seemed like an otherworldly type of throw from Anthony Richardson, so a lot of us focused on that. But that's a credit to just Anthony Richardson being different physically and athletically. The other side of it was, and the Texan side of it specifically was, whoa, Jimmy Ward got beat on that play. And I know a lot of the focus was on Derek Stingley supposedly getting beat on the play. But no, if you watch that, Derek Stingley is relying on his safety help and is kind of passing dude off to the safety. It felt like he's expecting to not get beat deep, and essentially the safety to be deep, and maybe Derek Stingley's underneath the route a little bit, so like basically they're bracketing him in that situation. They got the deep safety, and the deep safety is Jimmy Ward. But you go back and look at that play, and this did not stand out to me in real time, but when I watched it again, not only did Alec Pierce run past Jimmy Ward after Derek Stingley kind of passes him off, and I've seen a lot of the film guys say that maybe Jimmy Ward just was out of position. Maybe he should have been a little deeper, maybe he was just out of position, and that's the reason why. Man, he really still got run by in a way that he should not have been. Like you want to talk about a head start, giving a dude a head start, and he still pass you up. This was bad look. But not only that, that's bad enough for the play and giving up the play. But if we're going to talk about degradation, go back and look at it. Not only does Alec Pierce run past Jimmy Ward, but by the end of the play, by the time that ball lands in Alec Pierce's hands in the end zone, Derek Stingley has also run past Jimmy Ward. And that concerned me. It's one thing to get beat deep, especially by a speedster like Alec Pierce. Like that's a dude with some wheels on him. I get it. I don't think there's necessarily any shame in getting beat by Alec Pierce, even though you cannot get beat deep. That the design of that defense is to not get beat deep. So you either need to be faster or need to be in position to not get beat deep, to know what you can and can't do against that cat. But man, when I saw Stingley, who is passing Pierce off essentially to Ward, eventually recovered to the point where he passes up Jimmy too, man, that was not a good feeling. That was not a good feeling or a good sight, you know. And I'm not saying that Jimmy Ward has no athleticism, has nothing left in the tank, and that he's washed and all of that. But I do think that this is something to monitor for real. For real, for real. Something to monitor and also not forget the fact that they added to his contract. You know, they added a year to Jimmy Ward's contract at a time that I don't feel like that was exactly necessary. Also at a time where a lot of us have been having a conversation about just overhauling that safety room, or at least the top of it. Because I think we all like Eric Murray and, you know, Eric Murray as a backup, as a veteran backup, and then Kalen Bullock as potentially as a starter, but certainly as a rookie. You might think about, hey, I don't know if he's ready for this, or, you know, maybe ease him in. Shout out to him for his first interception in his first career game. But we've been having that conversation about safety. Like, do they just need to upgrade this position overall? Jalen Petrie moving to a different position, all of that. Jimmy Ward with the age and the injury. This felt like that play specifically felt like a real live example of, okay, maybe we should take a look at this. Safety's getting beat deep. That happened last year. Happens this year. Happens in this game. I'm concerned about it. Legitimately concerned about it. And then with this game coming up, okay, I think that the Bears are food. I think the Bears are food on Sunday Night Football for the Texans based on, and look, let me be clear about this. I'm basing this on the week one outcomes. Those outcomes and what we saw in week one may very well just like not factor at all into what we see in week two on Sunday Night Football with the Texans and the Bears. But if it does, if we are to glean anything about the identities of these teams based on what they did in week one, and both of them won in week one. Texans beat the Colts. Bears handled business. Shout out to the Bears for handling business. Come from behind victory against the Tennessee Titans. Okay, to help make the Texans the only undefeated team after week one, the only undefeated team in AFC South. Okay, Bears beat the Titans. Jaguars coughed it up to the Dolphins. And the Texans handled business against the Colts. Okay, but if we were to glean anything from that first week, I think that the Bears are food. I do not think that they are as good of a football team as the Texans, and that's mostly because their offense has not quite figured it out yet. I'm not sure how much I trust their offense. As intrigued as I am by Caleb Williams, the pass catching options that they've added Keenan Allen. They drafted Rome Odunze. They just paid DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. I know in Chicago they're talking about, hey, how come Cole Kmet is not more involved in the offense? Having that conversation already after one game. But I just don't trust it. I don't trust it against a DeMeco Ryans-led defense at home in the season opener. I'm sorry, in the home opener for the season. Like, I think the Bears are food. And before week one, I thought this was going to be an intriguing game. I am still as excited about it and excited for it now as I was before. But I'm not going into it expecting as close of a game as I was before. Because the Texans showed that while they may be a little bit rusty in the passing game, it's still there. It's still there. And they've added this new component where they can run it down your throats now, apparently. Good luck with that. The Bears were a flat out disappointment. No way around it. I know they won the game, but they got some help on defense and special teams. I don't think they had an offensive touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that they had an offensive touchdown. And Caleb Williams did look like a rookie. So I think they're food. I think they're food on Sunday Night Football. I'm picking the Texans to win going away. I don't have a score, but I got them winning by a lot. How about that? I got the Texans winning by a lot. And I'm excited for it, excited to see it. But the thing that I was concerned about is something that I could see rearing its ugly head. Like if I'm wrong about this game, and if it is closer than I'm expecting it to be, and if the Bears do have a chance of winning it, which I am not predicting, it'll be because of those big plays. It'll be because of those explosive plays that it seems like the Texans' back end is vulnerable to because of the safety situation. That's what's going to be the reason. Now, if they can generate some kind of pass rush, which I think they can because the Bears' offensive line is not very good, and the Texans' defensive line, I think, is very good. They do that. A lot of that stuff's probably not going to even matter about the back end and them not being very athletic on the back end, or either lacking athleticism in some cases or experience in another. Between Jimmy Ward, who's in his early to mid 30s now, and Kalen Bullock, who's a rookie. So that's there. But if they generate a pass rush, and I expect them to do so, they should be fine. I think that the matchup is right there, as I just explained it. Texans defensive line, which is dynamic, against the Bears offensive line that I don't think is very good. And then offensively for the Texans, I think that the Bears are a worthwhile defensive matchup for them. I think they'll be able to solve it. I think the Texans will be able to solve the Bears. They have two of the better coverage linebackers in football, between Edwards and Edmonds. But and then of course Jalen Johnson, one of their cornerbacks, is very good. Look, they have a good defense. It's a good defense. They made things happen too against the Titans. They have a good defense. I think that I'm not worried about the Texans offense being able to solve the Bears defense for the most part. Now, the last time I felt that way with them going up against a really good defense, I want to say it might have been that Jets game, the game that I probably bring up for too many people's taste, because I was so wrong about it going in that I just cannot get over it. It lingers in my mind because I was so wrong about the game going into it. But I feel like I'm going to be right about this. The Bears are food. Their offensive line cannot compete with the Texans' defensive line. I think there will be plays to be made on defense for the Texans. And then offensively, look, man, I don't see what they can't do. You know, I don't really see what they can't do. I mean, they were able to make things happen and beat a formidable opponent on the road, even with their pass protection not being up to snuff. Even with CJ Stroud not necessarily being at his absolute best. Imagine if he is. Like Stroud, to me, this is what's funny. I'll say this about CJ Stroud. Stroud had a B game, C plus B game by his standards. Now, by other quarterback standards, it probably would have been an A game. But by his own standards, or the standards I should say we've set for him, I'm not going to speak for him, but by his own standards that have been set, let me say this again, by the standards that have been set by others for him, that probably was not an A game, certainly not like an A plus game. He was still pretty damn good without it being an A plus game. So I felt like him not having a great game still didn't even take him out of the MVP conversation. I feel like, and it would be stupid if one game took you out of the MVP conversation, but to me, he's still firmly planted in it based off of how he played, based off of the ability that he showed, and just the type of quarterback that he is. I still think that CJ Stroud for MVP is a real possibility, depending on how this team obviously plays throughout the year. Now, if Joe Mixon is going to run the ball 30 times for 100 plus yards every game, it's going to be hard for him to win that award. But I don't think that that's going to happen. I think Joe Mixon is just going to be a super reliable and dynamic option for you out of the backfield. Somebody that you know, hey man, if we need to calm things down, or hey, if we need to just get physical, if we need to remind them who the fuck we are, we gonna do that. Joe Mixon gonna do that. He gonna lean his shoulder into your defensive back's chest, and the next time he get to the second level, your defense will regret it. Oh, he come again. Like he is a dude that you just absolutely do not want to tackle. And they got a few of those. They got Joe Mixon as that in the backfield. They got Nico Collins as that catching the ball. Stephon Diggs, underrated, like strong for his, like doesn't look imposing. You look at him like, oh, just a regular size, not a big guy. Apparently strong as hell. So yeah, man, overall, the Texans are able to impose a level of physicality and play a type of bully ball that has just not been on brand with them in the past. And looks like it is going to be something that they can do now. And so that's why they're for real, not just hyped. This Sunday night football game, and I will be in the building. I will be basically working from sun up to sundown, and even past that. I'll probably work every waking moment of Sunday and still try to find a way after the game to do what I didn't do last week, and that's make sure that y'all get my thoughts immediately from the game. I should be able to do that on Sunday night, because what the hell else am I going to be doing other than covering this? But the Texans, and not just a new identity, but an added element to their identity, is something that I think is going to take them a long way. And I think it's going to be a big reason why they're able to handle up on the Bears. This game is not going to be nearly as close as I thought it was going to be, not just when the schedule came out, but even just a couple of weeks ago. I got the Texans winning, going away by a mile, however you want to, whatever the spread. I ain't even looked at the spread. Whatever the spread is, they're going to beat that. You know what I mean? Like I got the Texans all the way in this game, and it's because they showed me something that I did not know that they had, and the Bears flat out disappointed against a Titans team that I thought they should have played better football against. That is it for this edition of the B Block Podcast. I will be back Sunday, late Sunday night to react to Texans Bears. In the meantime, make sure that you are subscribed, rating, reviewing the B Block Podcast. You can do that pretty much wherever it is you get your podcast. I prefer that you go ahead and leave one of those Apple reviews because they look real nice. And also, you can subscribe on YouTube to B Block Podcast on YouTube as well. The video form of this podcast does live there on YouTube, so make sure that you are supporting. We're trying to get the numbers up on YouTube. We don't really do a whole lot there. This is mostly an audio medium, but I made sure that we've got the video element to it as well. So if that's how you consume your podcast, I want you to know that YouTube is certainly an option for you as well. So again, make sure you're subscribing, rating, liking, reviewing, telling your people about it, all of that. And until next time, y'all be good.